Welcome to Monk's Temple. Find a comfortable position, and allow your breath to settle into its own rhythm. There is nowhere you need to be, nothing you need to do, except to simply be present in this moment. The journey we begin tonight is not about finding a destination, but about discovering the richness of the path itself, even when it feels steep and uncertain. The wisdom we will explore is rooted in the timeless teachings of Buddhism, a path illuminated by the Buddha's profound understanding of the human heart. It is a wisdom that does not remove life's challenges, but transforms our relationship to them, revealing a strength that is not hard like stone, but resilient like a deep, flowing river. Let me begin with an original story, a tale of a unique forest. In this forest grew a variety of trees, but two stood side by side. One was a tall, straight pine, proud and unyielding. The other was a willow, its branches supple and flowing. A great storm descended upon the forest, with winds that threatened to uproot everything. The pine stood rigid, resisting the gale with all its might. It fought bravely, but with a terrible crack, its trunk snapped, and it fell. The willow, however, did not resist. It bent low, its branches sweeping the ground, dancing with the wind's fury. It gave way completely, offering no resistance. And when the storm passed, the willow slowly straightened, its roots still deep in the earth, its spirit unharmed. This is a core principle in Buddhism, the strength of non-resistance. The Buddha taught that suffering often arises from our rigid attachment to how we think things should be. The pine represented our will, our desire to control, to stand firm against all of life's changes. The willow embodied the wisdom of acceptance, of flowing with circumstances without losing one's center. Your challenges are not asking you to become harder and more unyielding. They are inviting you to discover the resilient flexibility that already exists within you, the ability to bend so you do not break. I recall a time from my own life, walking through a season of profound loss. I felt like a boat unmoored in a vast, gray sea. I tried everything to anchor myself. To plans, to memories, to a future I could no longer envision. It was only when I was utterly exhausted, when I stopped fighting the waves of grief and simply allowed myself to float, that I felt a different kind of support. It was the support of the water itself, of the present moment holding me, even in its vastness. I wasn't saved by finding land, but by realizing I couldn't drown in what I was finally willing to feel. This personal turning point echoed a fundamental Buddhist teaching. Peace is not the absence of the storm, but the stillness found in its very center. We exhaust ourselves trying to reach the edge of the weather, when true refuge is in ceasing to run. If this approach to navigating life's difficulties speaks to you, you have found a harbor. Consider subscribing to Monk's Temple. Your subscription is more than a button. It is a gentle nod to your own journey, a commitment to returning to this space of reflection whenever you need to remember your innate resilience. It allows this sanctuary of spoken wisdom to grow and continue. Welcome to our community. Now, let's explore a metaphor of hidden growth, the story of the ceramic bowl and the gold lacquer. In a village known for its pottery, there was an artisan who specialized in mending broken ceramics. A villager brought him a beloved rice bowl, shattered into a dozen pieces. Heartbroken, the owner said, "Please, make it whole again. Hide the cracks." The artisan nodded but worked in a way that seemed strange. Instead of using invisible glue, he took a precious resin infused with fine gold powder. He carefully joined each piece, allowing the golden adhesive to seep into the hairline fractures, highlighting them rather than hiding them. When he returned the bowl, the owner was astonished. Where there was once a plain vessel, now a web of luminous gold traced every line of its breaking and repair. It was more beautiful, more valuable, than it had ever been before. This is the Japanese art of kintsugi, and it is a perfect reflection of a Buddhist truth. The Buddha's teachings help us see that our wounds, our broken places, are not flaws to be disguised. They are the very sites where our deepest healing and most unique beauty can emerge. When we honor our struggles, when we mend with compassion and attention, we do not return to an unbroken state. We become something new, something with a history written in gold. Your fractures are not your failure, they are the potential map of your transformation. Consider another tale, of the lighthouse and the fog. A lighthouse keeper prided himself on his powerful beam that could cut through the darkest night, guiding ships safely to harbor. But one season, a persistent, dense fog settled over the coast for weeks. His mighty light was useless, swallowed whole by the gray mist. He felt impotent, a failure. In his frustration, he stopped lighting the lamp altogether. It was then, in the deep quiet and blindness of the fog, that he began to hear. He heard the deep, mournful bellow of the foghorn from a neighboring point. He heard the careful, slow bell buoys ringing in the channel. He heard the whispered conversations of fishermen navigating by sound and memory. He realized the guiding presence was not gone, it had simply changed form. When the fog finally lifted, he still lit his lamp, but now he also listened, understanding that guidance is not a single, brilliant truth, but a symphony of perceptions adapted to the conditions. Buddhism teaches us about the middle way, avoiding extremes. Sometimes our usual light, our usual way of seeing and thinking, fails us in the fog of confusion or depression. The wisdom is not to curse the fog, but to learn to listen in the stillness it brings, to find guidance in senses and intuitions we had neglected. Your confusion may not be a lack of light, but an invitation to navigate by a different, deeper sense of knowing. Let me share a story about time and perspective, the weaver of seasons. A young, impatient weaver was tasked with creating a tapestry depicting a single tree through the year. She worked quickly, wanting to see the final, beautiful image. She wove brilliant green for spring, deep gold for autumn, stark white for winter. But her teacher, an old woman, looked at the work and sighed. "You have woven the idea of the seasons," she said. "But you have not woven the transitions." The teacher took the loom and, with painstaking slowness, began to weave where green met gold. She did not create a sharp line, but a subtle, messy intermingling of hues, flecks of gold in the green, threads of lingering green in the gold. She wove the brittle, brown edges of a leaf not yet fallen. She wove the first, hesitant bud pushing through frost. The tapestry became not a series of separate pictures, but a single, flowing story of becoming and unbecoming. The Buddha's teaching on impermanence is not a cold statement that everything ends. It is a warm observation that everything is in a sacred state of transition. Our pain often comes from wanting to live in the pure, clear picture of spring or summer, resenting the messy, in-between states. But your life is not a series of perfect seasons. It is a continuous, holy weaving of transitions. The discomfort you feel in change is not a sign you are off course. It is the feeling of the loom at work, weaving the complex, beautiful truth of your journey. Let's deepen our journey with a story about sound and silence. In a monastery famous for its chanting, there was a novice with a voice of stunning clarity. He could hold the purest notes, and the others would often fall silent just to listen. He believed his gift was his contribution, his path to enlightenment. Then, an illness touched his throat. For months, he could not speak above a whisper, and singing was impossible. He fell into a deep despair, convinced his purpose was lost. The abbot, seeing his sorrow, gave him a new duty, to ring the large, ceremonial bell that marked the hours of meditation. His task was not to create sound, but to initiate it. To strike the bell once, cleanly, and then to sit and listen to the entire life cycle of its tone, from the bold initial strike to the faintest, fading vibration disappearing into silence. At first, he did this mechanically. But as weeks passed, his attention shifted from the action of striking to the profound journey of the sound itself. He began to hear not just the note, but the space around it, the silence that both preceded and swallowed it. He felt how the silence was not empty, but rich and full, the womb and the tomb of the sound. When his voice eventually returned, it was different. It held a new depth, a humility, and a profound respect for the quiet between the phrases. The Buddha taught the importance of right speech, but this story speaks to right listening. Our own voice, our own actions, are the strike. But our growth, our wisdom, is cultivated in our willingness to listen fully to the consequences, to the echoes, and to the vast, teaching silence that holds it all. Your period of being voiceless, of feeling you have nothing to contribute, might be a sacred assignment to listen, to the world, to your heart, to the silent wisdom that speaks only when we stop making noise. Consider now a different kind of metaphor, the unfired clay vessel. A potter shaped a beautiful vase and placed it with care in the kiln for its final firing. But partway through the intense heat, the kiln failed. The vase was removed, hardened but not vitrified, porous and fragile. The potter deemed it a loss, a greenware piece, and set it aside on a shelf. There it sat for years, gathering dust, a symbol of unfinished potential. One day, a visiting sage saw it. He picked it up, blew the dust away, and placed a single, dry orchid stem in it. "Ah," he said. "Perfect." The potter was confused. "It is weak. It never reached its full strength." The sage replied, "Its purpose was not to be impervious. Its porosity is its gift. An impervious glaze would shed water. This vessel absorbs it, slowly, gently, keeping the stem alive for days. It did not become what you intended. It became what was needed." In Buddhism, we speak of letting go of fixed views. We often judge ourselves harshly for not being fired in the way we expected. Not as resilient, not as successful, not as finished as we'd hoped. But what if your perceived fragility, your porosity, your sensitivity, is not a flaw in your manufacture? What if it is the very quality that allows you to absorb the nourishment of life slowly and deeply, to sustain yourself and others in a way that a harder, glossier vessel never could? Your supposed weakness may be a hidden, crucial kind of strength. I remember a long walk on a beach after a storm. The shore was littered with debris, shattered shells, torn seaweed, splintered wood. It looked like a landscape of ruin. But as I walked, I saw sandpipers darting through the wreckage, finding abundant insects. I saw a child collecting the most beautiful, rare shells, broken in ways that revealed intricate spirals never seen when whole. The storm's violence had not just destroyed, it had rearranged, revealed, and provided. It was a living lesson in the Buddhist concept of dependent origination. That all things are interconnected in a web of cause and effect. The disaster for one creature was the feast for another. The end of one form was the discovery of a new beauty. Your personal storm, the one that left your shoreline littered with the wreckage of old plans, may have also uncovered hidden spirals of insight and created conditions for a nourishment you cannot yet see. Let's explore an original parable about weight and flight, the kite and the boulder. A kite maker crafted a magnificent dragon kite, longing to see it soar higher than any other. On the day of the festival, he launched it. It climbed beautifully, but then began to jerk and dive erratically. Frustrated, he saw the problem: the kite's tail, a long, ornate series of bows, was too light. It provided no stabilizing drag. In a moment of inspiration, he took a small, smooth stone from the ground and tied it to the very end of the tail. Others laughed. "You are weighing down your dream," they said. But when he launched the kite again, the stone's gentle, constant drag created the necessary tension. The kite ceased its frantic lurching. It caught the wind steadily and began to rise in smooth, majestic circles, climbing higher and higher until it was a serene speck against the blue. The very thing that seemed like a burden, the weight of the stone, was the key to its stable flight. In our lives, we often resent our burdens, the weights of obligation, of past mistakes, of present challenges. We try to cut them loose to be free. But the Buddha's path suggests that some weights are not there to hold us down, but to ground us, to provide the necessary tension for stability. That responsibility you carry, that memory that anchors you, that difficulty that keeps you humble, it may not be holding you back from soaring. It may be the critical balance point, the wisdom weight that allows you to catch the wind of opportunity without being torn apart by it. Now, a story of hidden currents, the two ponds. On a mountainside were two ponds, fed by the same spring. One pond was on an open ledge, exposed to sun and wind. Its water was clear and bright, but also shallow, quick to evaporate in heat, quick to ripple with every breeze. The other pond lay in a deep rock basin, shrouded by ancient trees. Its surface was often covered in a layer of floating leaves and pollen, making it look dark and still. The clear pond pitied the dark one. "You are stagnant," it said. "I am vibrant and alive." But during a long drought, the spring's flow diminished to a trickle. The clear, exposed pond vanished within weeks, its bed baking in the sun. The dark, leaf-covered pond, protected from evaporation by its natural blanket, retained its depth. Beneath the surface layer of debris, the water was cool, deep, and teeming with life that had shelter. The Buddha often taught about the depth of mind that lies beneath the surface agitation of thought. We often prize the clear, bright, reactive mind, always engaged, always visible. We fear the mind that seems dark, still, or cluttered with old leaves of memory. But that depth, that capacity to retain nourishment and shelter life beneath a protective layer, is a profound form of resilience. Your quietness, your seeming withdrawal, your inner world that feels murky or still, may not be stagnation. It may be the deep, sheltered pond conserving its essential waters, preserving life, while the more obvious sources of energy around you come and go. Do not mistake depth for darkness. Let us turn now to the wisdom of the unfinished path. There is a tale of a pilgrim who set out to walk the ancient, circular path around the sacred mountain. He was determined to complete the circuit in record time, to achieve the merit of the pilgrimage. He walked day and night, eyes fixed on the path ahead, ignoring the ache in his legs, the beauty of the rhododendron forests, the other pilgrims he passed. On the final day, he stumbled across the finish line, exhausted but triumphant. He had done it. But when an old guide asked him, "What did the mountain teach you?" the pilgrim could only describe the dust of the trail and the blisters on his feet. He had conquered the distance, but he had never met the mountain. Another pilgrim, an elderly woman, started the same circuit. She walked slowly, stopping often to rest, to sip tea with strangers, to watch a bird build its nest. A sudden landslide blocked the path halfway. She could not complete the circle. She sat by the blockage for a long time, watching the clouds weave around the peak. Finally, she placed a small stone from her pocket on the landslide in a gesture of respect, and turned back the way she came. When she returned to the starting village, her face was radiant. The old guide asked her the same question. She smiled. "The mountain taught me that the path is not a circle to be closed, but a presence to be met. My pilgrimage was not in finishing, but in every step I took with attention." This story reflects the heart of Buddhist mindfulness. The Buddha taught the importance of the path itself, the Noble Eightfold Path, not as a checklist to be completed, but as a quality of attention to be brought to every moment. We often fixate on goals, on finishing, on achieving a state of completion where we imagine our struggles will end. But true peace is found in the quality of our journey, in the mindful step, not in the frantic rush to an imaginary finish line. The obstacle that blocks your planned route may not be a failure. It may be the mountain's gentle insistence that you stop, look up, and receive the teaching of the present moment. Consider a metaphor from the world of music, the untuned string. In an orchestra, all instruments must be tuned to the same note before playing. A violinist, however, became attached to the unique, slightly off-pitch sound of her instrument's A string. She found its faint quiver more interesting than the sterile perfection of the tuning fork. When the orchestra played, her note clashed, creating a subtle dissonance that marred the harmony. The conductor gently explained, "Your note is not wrong in itself. But harmony requires a shared foundation." Tuning is not about erasing your uniqueness, it is about aligning it with a greater whole, so your true voice can contribute to the symphony, not distract from it. This is akin to the Buddhist teaching of Sangha, or community, and the importance of ethical alignment. Our personal struggles, our unique pains and perspectives, are valid. But when we cling to them in isolation, seeing them as our sole identity, we create dissonance in our own lives and in our connections. The path is about tuning our heart, aligning our intentions, speech, and actions with the harmonious principles of compassion and wisdom. This alignment doesn't erase your unique story, it allows it to become part of a beautiful, interconnected symphony of existence. Your feeling of being out of tune may be a call not to discard your instrument, but to lovingly adjust it so you can play your part in a greater, more beautiful song. I recall a period where I tried to cultivate a perfect garden. I researched companion planting, built ideal soil, and planted with meticulous care. Yet, a patch of stubborn, ugly weeds always appeared in one corner: dandelions, clover, and crabgrass. I fought them, pulled them, resented them. One day, a beekeeper visited. He walked straight to my weedy corner and smiled. "This," he said, "is your most important patch. This is what feeds the bees early in the spring, before the flowers bloom." My despised weeds were a lifeline. The Buddha taught that our aversions, the things we push away and label as undesirable, are often the very things that sustain a hidden, necessary ecology. That persistent anxiety, that stubborn flaw, that person who irritates you? What if, in the larger ecosystem of your soul's growth, it is serving a purpose you cannot yet comprehend? It might be providing a bitter but necessary nectar for the pollinators of your resilience, ensuring that something vital within you continues to thrive. Before you wage war on the weed, ask what life it supports. Now, let's contemplate an original story about reflection and absorption, the mirror and the sponge. In a quiet room sat two objects, a pristine silver mirror and a simple, porous sea sponge. A beam of sunlight fell upon them. The mirror, with pride, captured the light perfectly and cast a brilliant rectangle onto the opposite wall. It said, "See, I take the light and give it form. I am clear and precise." The sponge, humble and dry, simply absorbed the warmth of the beam, holding it within its many cavities. When the sunbeam passed, the mirror's projection vanished instantly, leaving the wall dark. The sponge, however, remained warm to the touch for a long time, radiating the stored heat gently into the cool room. We often strive to be the mirror, to reflect life perfectly, to show immediate understanding, to project a clear image. But this is reactive, dependent on constant external light. Buddhism encourages us to cultivate the nature of the sponge, the ability to absorb experiences, the light and the dark, the joy and the sorrow, to take them into the depths of our being, and to allow them to transform slowly into a warmth we can radiate outward, even when the immediate source has passed. Your ability to reflect quickly may feel impressive, but do not undervalue your capacity to absorb deeply, to hold experiences with patient porosity, and to release their transformed wisdom as sustained, gentle warmth long after the event has passed. Let me share a final story for this part, about the two carvings. In a woodworker's shop, two blocks of the same fine cherry wood were chosen. One was carved into a fierce, protective temple guardian, its features sharp and imposing, finished with a hard, glossy lacquer. The other was carved into a gentle bodhisattva figure, sanded to a soft, matte smoothness, and left unsealed. They were placed in the temple garden. Over decades, the rain, sun, and wind worked on them. The guardian's hard lacquer eventually cracked and peeled, leaving the wood beneath stained and mottled, its fierce expression now looking strained and weary. The unsealed bodhisattva, however, simply weathered. The rain darkened its grain in beautiful patterns, the sun silvered its high points. It became not worn, but seasoned, its compassionate smile softening further into a look of profound, knowing peace. The Buddha taught the truth of change, anicca. We often try to seal ourselves with rigid beliefs, hardened attitudes, and glossy defenses against life's weathering. But these seals will always crack under the relentless truth of change. The path of wisdom is to dare to remain unsealed, vulnerable, open to the elements of experience. Yes, you will be weathered. But you will not crack and peel. You will season. You will develop a patina of grace, a beauty that comes not from being protected from life, but from having allowed life to touch you, change you, and reveal the enduring grain of your true nature. Let's explore a principle of deep resilience through the story of the deep-rooted grass. On a windswept cliff overlooking the sea, there grew no mighty trees, only a thick, humble carpet of coarse grass. Travelers would often remark on its tenacity, how it clung to life in thin soil, battered by salt spray and gales. A botanist, curious, came to study it. He tried to pull up a handful to examine its roots, but found it nearly impossible. The grass did not resist with stiffness, Instead, it yielded just enough so that pulling only tightened its grip. When he finally excavated a small patch with a trowel, he discovered a truth invisible from the surface. For every single blade above, there was a vast, tangled web of roots below, interwoven with the roots of every other blade, creating a single, living mat that was anchored not in one place, but in the entire cliffside. The strength of the grass was not in its individual blades, which bent and frayed, but in its collective, hidden interconnectedness. This is a profound metaphor for a Buddhist understanding of community and inner strength. The Buddha taught the concept of praditya samutpada, or dependent origination, the truth that nothing exists in isolation. When we feel we are a solitary blade being torn by the wind, we suffer. But wisdom reveals we are part of a vast, unseen network of support, the kindness of strangers past and present, the lessons of ancestors, the interconnected web of life. Your resilience is not a solitary act of willpower, it is your inherent connection to the whole. You are not clinging on, you are being held by roots deeper and wider than you can see. Consider now the parable of the overfull cup. A seeker traveled far to meet a renowned teacher, his mind brimming with questions, arguments, and knowledge from other schools. He talked incessantly about his insights and his doubts. The teacher listened patiently and then began to pour tea into the seeker's cup. He poured and poured, even as the tea overflowed onto the table. The seeker cried, "Stop! It is full. No more will go in." The teacher set down the pot. "You are like this cup," he said gently. "So full of your own ideas that there is no space for anything new. To receive wisdom, you must first create some emptiness." This simple story, often told in Zen Buddhism, points to a vital attitude on the path. Our suffering is often compounded by the clutter of our own preconceptions, judgments, and constant mental commentary. We seek answers while our inner cup is already overflowing. The practice of mindfulness and meditation is, in part, the gentle act of emptying the cup, creating spaces of quiet, non-judgmental awareness where fresh understanding can be received. Your confusion or stagnation may not be a lack of answers, but a sign that your inner vessel is too full. The solution is not to seek more to pour in, but to find the courage to create a moment of empty, receptive silence. I remember a time tending a compost pile, that alchemical corner of the garden. I would add kitchen scraps, egg shells, coffee grounds, wilted lettuce, things that seemed like waste, the discarded ends of things. For a while, it just looked like a pile of garbage. But with time, air, and the unseen work of microbes, that rejected material transformed into the blackest, richest, most fragrant soil, teeming with life, the very best food for new growth. I saw in that process a perfect metaphor for the Buddhist principle of transformation. The teachings of the Buddha don't ask us to discard our painful experiences, our failures, our regrets, the emotional and mental scraps of our lives. Instead, they invite us to create an inner compost pile of mindful awareness. By turning these experiences over with the tool of compassionate attention, we allow them to decompose from raw, stinging wounds into fertile ground for wisdom, empathy, and new growth. That humiliating memory, that bitter disappointment, it is not just waste. Gathered mindfully, it becomes the nutrient-dense soil from which your most compassionate and understanding self can sprout. Now, let's envision a story about direction and stillness, the compass in the storm. A ship was caught in a furious hurricane in the open ocean. Waves towered over the deck, wind screamed in the rigging, and all visible landmarks were obliterated by rain and spray. The crew was in a panic, believing they were being driven blindly to their doom. The captain, however, remained in his cabin, his eyes fixed not on the chaotic window, but on the gimbaled compass on his table. While the ship was tossed wildly, the compass needle, suspended in fluid, trembled but consistently pointed north. By trusting that fixed point amidst the chaos, the captain could calculate their position and slowly, painfully, steer them through the storm toward safety. For the crew, the only reality was the terrifying motion. For the captain, the deeper reality was the constant, quiet truth of the compass. In Buddhism, the mind in meditation is often compared to such a compass. The storms of emotion, thought, and external circumstance will always arise. They are the weather of a human life. The practice is not to stop the storm, but to find and settle your awareness on your own, true north, the still, knowing presence of awareness itself that, like the compass needle, remains uncaptured by the tossing. When you feel lost in emotional turbulence, you are identifying with the ship being thrown, not with the awareness that can observe the throwing. Your peace is not found in calming the sea, an impossible task, but in finding the inner instrument that remains oriented amidst it all. Let's contemplate a subtle teaching through the tale of the shadow and the lantern. A man was terribly afraid of his own shadow. It seemed a grotesque, distorted version of himself that followed him everywhere, growing long and threatening in the evening light. He ran, trying to escape it, but it clung to his heels. He fought it, stamping at it, but it only moved with him. Exhausted, he finally sat down in despair, his back against a wall. As he sat, he noticed a lantern hanging from a branch nearby. He watched as his shadow, now cast by the lantern, splayed out before him on the ground. Then, a gentle breeze arose and swayed the lantern. His shadow on the ground began to move, stretching and shrinking, but it was no longer attached to his feet, it was dancing to the movement of the light source. In that moment, he understood, the shadow was not an entity chasing him. It was merely an effect created by his body intercepting the light. His fear vanished. He stood up, picked up the lantern, and walked on, now amused by the playful shapes his shadow made. The Buddha taught that much of our suffering comes from misunderstanding the source of our experience. We believe our fears, our anxieties, our negative self-concepts are solid entities pursuing us. In truth, they are like shadows. Ephemeral effects cast by the interplay of our conditioned mind, the body, and the light of circumstance. We waste our lives running from or fighting these shadows. Wisdom is the act of turning to recognize the light source, the nature of awareness itself, and realizing that the shadows have no substance of their own. They dance, but they cannot harm you once you see their true, dependent nature. Let's consider the wisdom of purposeful yielding through the story of the reed in the torrent. A mighty oak tree stood proudly on the bank of a river, its roots gripping the rocky soil with centuries-old strength. A slender reed grew beside it in the soft mud at the water's edge. One season, catastrophic rains swelled the river into a raging torrent that undercut the bank. The oak, resisting the water's force with all its might, held firm until the soil around its roots was completely washed away. With a groan of tearing wood, it toppled and was swept downstream, shattered. The reed, however, did not resist. As the floodwaters rose, it bent completely flat, submerging beneath the violent current. Its leaves and stem streamed with the flow, offering no obstacle. When the flood receded days later, the reed slowly straightened, bedraggled but rooted. It had survived not by fighting a force it could never defeat, but by becoming one with it temporarily. The Buddha's teachings on acceptance and non-self, anatta, are reflected here. We often identify with a solid, separate self like the oak, a self that must stand firm, defend its position, and resist all change. This creates immense suffering when change, like the flood, is inevitable. The reed embodies the wisdom of anatta, understanding that our true nature is more fluid, interconnected, and adaptable. In the face of overwhelming circumstances, resilience can look like complete, conscious yielding, not as defeat, but as an intelligent strategy for preservation. To bend completely is not to break, it is to acknowledge a power greater than your individual will, and to choose to flow with it until you can rise again. Where in your life are you being the oak, straining against an unstoppable current? Could you learn, for a time, to be the reed? Now, imagine a story about perception and scale, the ant on the mandala. Monks spent weeks creating an intricate, multicolored sand mandala on a temple floor, a vast, symbolic universe. An ant, going about its daily journey, wandered onto the edge of this magnificent creation. To the ant, the mandala was not a sacred map of the cosmos. It was a landscape of strange, colored sand mountains, treacherous smooth plains, and puzzling scent trails blocked by unfamiliar grains. It experienced it as a series of obstacles and pathways, of climbing and descending. It had no concept of the breathtaking beauty or profound meaning perceived by the human monks. This is a reflection on the Buddhist teaching of emptiness, sunyata. We often experience our lives as the ant experiences the mandala, an immediate landscape of personal obstacles, attractions, and aversions. We get lost in the granular details of our struggle, this hill of a problem, that valley of a disappointment. The wisdom of Buddhism invites us to occasionally perceive from the monk's perspective. To see that our personal landscape is part of a vast, intentional, and interconnected pattern whose full beauty and meaning transcend our limited, immediate experience. Your current struggle, seen up close, is a steep hill of colored sand. Seen from a higher perspective, it may be an essential part of a stroke in a sacred design you cannot yet comprehend. This isn't to diminish your pain, but to offer the solace of a larger context. I recall a lesson from a master calligrapher. I was struggling to perfect a single character, painting it over and over, growing more frustrated with each imperfect stroke. The master watched, then said, "You are focusing only on the ink." He took my brush, dipped it, and before touching the paper, made a slow, graceful movement in the empty air above it. Then he painted the character. It was flawless. The art, he said, is not just in the black ink you see. It is equally in the empty space you do not see. The space your arm moves through, the space within the curves of the character, the space around it on the paper. The ink gives it form, but the emptiness gives it life, breath, and meaning. This is a direct expression of a core Buddhist aesthetic and philosophical principle. We focus relentlessly on the solid things, our problems, our goals, our identities, the ink. We fear the empty spaces, the quiet, the uncertainty, the pauses, the not knowing. But the teaching reveals that the emptiness is not a void to be feared, it is the necessary ground from which all form emerges and gains its significance. Your moments of emptiness, of feeling unformed or lost, are not failures of ink. They are the vital, breathing spaces that allow the next stroke of your life to have meaning and grace. Honor the emptiness as much as the form. Let's explore an original parable about integration, the brook and the stained water. A crystal-clear brook babbled happily through a forest until it reached a patch of ground rich with iron oxide. The water flowing through this patch turned a deep, rusty red. The brook was horrified. "I am stained. I am ruined. My purity is lost," it cried. It tried to push the red water ahead of it, but it only mixed further. It tried to divert around the stain, but the source was in its very bed. In its despair, it slowed almost to a stop. An old tree whose roots drank from it spoke. "Why do you fight the color? It is now part of you. You have not become stained. You have become the brook that runs red through the iron earth. This is your unique story. Carry it. Further downstream, you will meet other waters, and you will share your story with them, and they will share theirs with you. You will not be the clear brook or the red brook, but the greater river that has known both." The brook listened, stopped resisting, and allowed the red to simply be part of its flow. Downstream, it met other streams. As they mingled, the red softened, becoming a subtle, rosy hue at certain times of day, considered uniquely beautiful by all who saw it. This is the Buddhist path of making peace with karma and past experience. We often see our wounds, our traumas, our mistakes as stains that ruin our pure, original self. We exhaust ourselves trying to reject or purge this part of our history. But wisdom involves integration. That stain is not a foreign element. It is the evidence of the specific ground you have traveled. It has become part of your composition. Your path is not to return to an imaginary purity, but to carry your full story with acceptance. As you flow forward and mingle with new experiences and compassion, the raw stain of pain will soften into the unique, nuanced hue of your hard-won wisdom, a beauty that only your particular journey could create. Now, a story about latent potential, the cold forge. In a blacksmith's shop, there was a lump of special steel that had been in the corner for years. It was cold, dark, and seemingly useless. Apprentices would occasionally try to work it, but without heating it in the forge first, their hammers just bounced off, making no impression. They declared it too hard, too stubborn, worthless. The master smith finally took it. He didn't attack it with a hammer. He placed it carefully in the heart of the fire and waited. He tended the fire patiently, not rushing. For a long time, nothing seemed to happen. Then, slowly, the metal began to change, first glowing a dull red, then a bright orange, then a brilliant, almost white-yellow heat. Only then, when it had been utterly transformed by the sustained heat, did he remove it. Under his hammer, the once impenetrable metal became malleable, flowing into the shape of a sublime, razor-sharp blade. The fire was not an enemy to the steel. It was the necessary condition for revealing its true, latent nature and purpose. Our darkest, most difficult periods, the times of intense emotional or psychological heat, are often seen as pointless suffering. We feel hammered by life while we are still cold, and it leaves us dented and bruised. The Buddhist view, however, suggests that such periods are like the forge. Their purpose is not to break you, but to soften you, to make you malleable to transformation. The master smith is your own patient, compassionate awareness. It does not rush the process. It tends the fire of your experience until the hardness of your resistance, your grief, or your fear finally softens into a state where it can be skillfully shaped into something strong, useful, and sharp with insight. You are not being destroyed in the fire. You are being prepared for your truest form. Let's contemplate the nature of support through the story of the arch and the keystone. A master stonemason was constructing a graceful archway, the entrance to a new meditation hall. He carefully placed each heavy, trapezoidal stone, each one leaning precariously on its neighbor, the entire structure looking incomplete and unstable. His apprentice watched with anxiety, certain it would collapse. Finally, the mason took one last, uniquely shaped stone, the keystone, and fitted it perfectly into the topmost center. In that moment, a miracle of physics occurred. The unstable leaning stopped. Each stone, which had been a burden to its neighbor, now became essential support. The downward force of gravity was transformed into a lateral force of mutual reinforcement, and the arch stood strong, capable of bearing immense weight. The keystone itself, though small, was the final piece that activated the strength of the whole. In our lives, we often feel like those separate, leaning stones, burdened, unstable, bearing the weight of others. We long for someone or something to take the weight away. The Buddhist teaching of interdependence shows us a different truth. Our struggles, our roles, our relationships are like those archstones. They seem like burdens until they are integrated into a conscious structure of meaning and mutual support. The keystone is often a moment of insight, a decision for compassion, or an act of forgiveness, the piece that doesn't carry the weight alone, but locks everything into a cohesive, resilient whole. Your feeling of bearing a heavy load may not mean you are in the wrong place. It may mean you are an essential part of an arch under construction, waiting for the insight that will transform your burden into integral support. Now, consider a lesson from the natural world. The forest after the fire. A dense, old-growth forest was ravaged by a lightning-sparked wildfire. For miles, all that remained were blackened, skeletal trees and ash-covered earth. It was a landscape of utter desolation. In the first year, it seemed a tomb. But then, slowly, life of a different kind emerged. Fireweed, a vibrant pink wildflower whose seeds only germinate in intense heat, painted the scorched earth. Woodpeckers found a bounty of insects in the dead wood. Sunlight, now reaching the forest floor for the first time in centuries, nourished a rush of new seedlings, species that could never have grown in the deep shade of the old canopy. The forest was not gone, it was being renewed. The fire was not an end, but a brutal, necessary part of its long life cycle. The Buddha taught about the cyclical nature of existence, of constant death and rebirth, samsara. We experience personal fires, loss, failure, drastic change. That seemed to burn our world to the ground. In the immediate aftermath, we see only ash and loss. But the wisdom of Dharma asks us to trust in the ecology of the soul. Certain seeds of new growth within us, resilience, empathy, courage, only germinate in the heat of catastrophe. New light can reach parts of us that were shaded by old, dense habits. The landscape after the fire feels barren, but it is a field of immense, raw potential. You are not looking at an end. You are standing in the fertile ashes of a necessary clearing. I remember watching a potter teach a child. The child was trying to center a lump of clay on the spinning wheel, but small, hard pebbles were embedded in it. Every time the child's hands applied pressure, the pebbles created grooves and gashes, ruining the smooth symmetry. The child grew frustrated, wanting to pick out every pebble. The potter gently stilled the wheel. "You don't need to remove them," she said. "You need to acknowledge them. They are part of your clay. Work with them. Let them shape the pot, too." She guided the child's hands to apply softer, more encompassing pressure, to let the pebble create a gentle indentation that became part of the vessel's design. The finished piece was not perfectly smooth, but it was textured, interesting, and strong. Our inner world is that clay, and our painful memories, our flaws, our rough edges, are those pebbles. Our instinct is to dig them out, to reject them. But the path of mindfulness, as taught in Buddhism, is one of inclusive awareness. We learn to hold our entire experience, the smooth clay and the rough pebbles, with a soft, encompassing attention. We don't eliminate the difficulty, we incorporate it into our shaping. The resulting person is not a flawless, generic vessel, but a unique, textured being whose strength includes the history of its own imperfections. Let's envision a story about patience and unseen progress, the master vintner. In a valley, two vintners received the same grapes from the same harvest. The first, impatient for reward, crushed his grapes immediately and bottled the young, frothy juice. It was drinkable quickly, but it was sharp, simple, and transient. It peaked within months and then turned to vinegar. The second vintner took his grapes into a deep, cool, dark cellar. He fermented them slowly in oak barrels, then transferred the wine to stone casks where it rested, forgotten by most, for years. During this time, it appeared dormant. But in the darkness, a silent, alchemical conversation was happening between the wine, the wood, and the minute amounts of air. Tannins softened, complex flavors married, and a profound depth developed. When it was finally decanted a decade later, it was a revelation, a rich, nuanced, and enduring masterpiece. The Buddha often spoke of the fruits of practice ripening in their own time. Our culture prizes quick results, immediate relief, fast achievement. We ferment our experiences in the shallow, bright light of quick judgment and reaction, producing a sharp, short-lived understanding. But the deepest wisdom, the most resilient peace, is aged in the dark cellar of patient, sustained practice. It requires a willingness to be still, to not know, to let your experiences rest in the deep casks of your awareness without forcing a premature conclusion. Your period of seeming inactivity, where no progress is visible, may not be stagnation. It may be your soul's necessary aging process, where the raw juice of experience is being transformed, in darkness and patience, into a wisdom that will sustain you for a lifetime. Now, a parable about perspective and burden, the boulder in the road. A traveler came upon a massive boulder blocking a narrow mountain path. He saw it as a cursed obstacle. He pushed against it until he was bruised and exhausted. He cursed it, sat down in defeat, and declared his journey over. Another traveler came upon the same boulder. She too saw it as an obstacle, but then she noticed its flat, sun-warmed top and the magnificent view of the valley it now afforded. She climbed up, sat upon it, ate her lunch, and rested in the new vista. Refreshed, she found she could now see a smaller, alternative path around the boulder that was invisible from the road below. She continued her journey, nourished and with a broader perspective. The boulder hadn't moved. The difference was in the relationship to it. This is a practical application of the Buddhist principle of right view. Our suffering is rarely about the objective fact of a problem, it's about our relationship to that fact. The pushing, the cursing, the identification with defeat. Wisdom involves shifting the relationship. Can you stop pushing for a moment? Can you climb upon the problem, rest with it, and see what new perspective it forces you to take? The obstacle itself may become your vantage point, your place of necessary rest, and the very thing that reveals a new way forward you were previously too close to the ground to see. Your problem is not just a block. It is also potential elevation. Let's explore a principle of intrinsic worth through the story of the weathered coin. A man possessed a rare, ancient coin, passed down through his family. Over generations, it had become worn smooth, its inscriptions were faint ghosts, its emperor's profile softened to a mere suggestion. Seeing other collectors' coins that were sharp and clear, he felt ashamed of his heirloom. He took it to a restorer, demanding it be polished and re-engraved to look new. The restorer, an old man who understood metals and time, held the coin gently. "I can make it shiny," he said, "but if I do, I will remove its story. This smoothness is the touch of your great-grandfather's palm. This faintness is the proof of its journey through wars and peace, held in 100 pockets. Its value is no longer in the legibility of its inscription, but in the depth of its silence. To make it new would be to make it ordinary." The man, understanding, took the coin back and now kept it not as a display piece, but as a touchstone, a solid, smooth reminder of endurance. In Buddhism, we contemplate impermanence and non-self. We often feel like that coin, our edges worn down by experience, our defining features blurred by struggle. We compare ourselves to sharper, newer ideals and feel deficient. But the Dharma invites us to see the value in the weathering. Your smooth edges may be the evidence of compassion wearing down your harshness. Your blurred inscriptions might be the sign that life has touched you so deeply it has reshaped you. Your worth is not in maintaining a pristine, original condition, but in the silent, profound story written into your very substance by time and experience. Do not seek restoration to an ideal, honor the sacred wear of your journey. Now, imagine a teaching about containment and release, the bellows and the hearth. In a blacksmith's forge, the bellows are essential. They are empty, flexible sacks, constantly in motion, expanding to draw in cool, common air, then contracting to expel that air in a focused, potent stream into the heart of the fire. Without the bellows' rhythm of emptiness and fullness, intake and release, the fire would dwindle to embers. The fire itself is transformative, but it depends entirely on the humble, rhythmic work of the bellows. Our emotional and spiritual life can be seen in this dynamic. The heart is the hearth where transformation occurs. But the mind, in its mindful function, is the bellows. If we are always contracted, always expelling, always reacting, always tight, we burn out quickly on a hot, shallow breath. If we are always expanded, always taking in, always absorbing stimulation without release, we become flaccid and ineffective. The Buddhist practice of mindfulness is this rhythmic work. It is the conscious, gentle expansion to take in the full experience of the present moment, the cool, common air of what is. And then it is the conscious, gentle contraction to release that experience on the out-breath, not clinging to it, fueling the transformative fire of awareness without being consumed by the fuel itself. When you feel stuck, ask, am I stuck in expansion, overwhelmed by intake? Or am I stuck in contraction, hoarding old air? The path is in the gentle, conscious rhythm between the two, breathing in reality, breathing out release, keeping the inner fire of wisdom alive. I recall observing a spider in a corner of an old barn. A storm the night before had torn her web to shreds. In the morning, I expected to find her gone. But there she was, not in the remnants of the old web, but in the very center of the space, secreting a single, silken line from her body. She attached it to a beam, then dropped, weightless, on that line, swinging in the draft until her feet touched another beam far away. She had created the first anchor line for a new web. She didn't mourn the old pattern, she used the substance of her own being to bridge the new emptiness. We are like that spider. Our carefully constructed lives, our relationships, careers, identities, can be torn apart by sudden storms. We stare at the tattered fragments. The Buddhist teaching of right effort isn't about desperately repairing the old, familiar web. It's about finding the courage to secrete that first, brave line of intention from the center of your being, to swing out into the unknown space, and to trust that you can find a new point of attachment from which to begin weaving again, differently. The material for your resilience is not in the old web, but in your own continuous capacity to produce a strong, silken thread of purpose and connect it to life anew. Let's contemplate an original story about depth and surface, the whirlpool and the deep current. On the surface of a wide river, a powerful whirlpool formed, spinning with terrifying force, drawing leaves and debris into its vortex. A boatman, fearing it, gave it a wide berth, warning others of its deadly pull. But a pearl diver who knew the river's secrets approached it differently. He took a deep breath and dove not away from the whirlpool, but straight into its center. To the astonishment of the boatman, the diver disappeared into the vortex and then, moments later, surfaced calmly downstream, a luminous pearl in his hand. He explained, "The whirlpool is only a surface phenomenon, a conflict of surface currents. Beneath it, the deep river flows on, strong and steady and undisturbed. To pass through the chaos, you must dive deep beneath it." Our emotional turmoil, anxiety, panic, obsessive thought, is the whirlpool. It is real and powerful on the surface of our mind. Our instinct is to paddle frantically away from it, to avoid it. But the practice of meditation, core to Buddhism, teaches us the pearl diver's skill, to dive deep. To take the breath of mindfulness and sink beneath the churning surface thoughts and feelings, into the deeper, steady current of bare awareness that flows undisturbed beneath all mental weather. The chaos doesn't disappear, but you are no longer trapped in its vortex. You find that beneath the turmoil, your true nature is calm, clear, and capable of bringing up pearls of insight from the depth. When you are caught in a mental whirlpool, don't just paddle. Remember to dive. Now, a story about the illusion of separation, the chisel and the sculpture. A master sculptor was revealing a figure from a block of marble. His chisel struck, and a small chip flew off, landing in the dust. The chip, now separate, felt a profound loss. "I was part of something great," it thought, "and now I am alone, useless, headed for the scrap heap." It lay in the shadow of the growing sculpture, filled with envy and sorrow. But the sculptor's apprentice, sweeping up at the end of the day, saw the chip. It was pure white, with a fascinating crystalline sparkle. He collected it and many others, ground them to a fine powder, and mixed them with linseed oil to create a luminous gesso, the priming layer for a sacred painting. The chip, now transformed, became the very ground that allowed gold leaf to adhere and pigments to shine, part of a new, different masterpiece. The chip's suffering came from believing separation was permanent and fatal. The Buddhist teaching of interconnectedness reveals a different truth. What seems like a loss, a casting off, a separation from a whole you identified with, is often a transition into a new form and a new function in a larger, unseen pattern. You are not a discarded chip. You are a particle in transition, being gathered for a purpose you cannot yet imagine. The sculptor's hand is not cruel, it is skillful. Trust that even your sense of broken-offness is part of a continual process of creation. Let's reflect on the nature of effort through the parable of the gardener and the rain. A devoted gardener tended a plot of arid land, determined to grow a lush garden. Each day, he carried heavy buckets of water from a distant well, sweating under the sun. He poured the water carefully at the base of each plant, but the parched earth drank it instantly, and the plants remained stunted. The gardener grew weary and despondent, feeling his immense effort was futile. One afternoon, exhausted, he fell asleep under a tree. While he slept, a gentle, prolonged rain began to fall. It soaked deep into the soil, reaching roots his surface watering never could. He awoke to a garden refreshed not just on the surface, but to its depths. The rain had done in hours what weeks of his straining effort could not. The gardener's effort was not wrong, but it was of a different kind. Localized, forceful, and exhausting. The rain's effort was effortless, widespread, and penetrative. In our striving to overcome hardship, we often adopt the gardener's initial method, sheer, forceful, personal will apply directly to the problem. The Buddha's teaching of right effort, however, includes an element of wise surrender, of creating the conditions for grace, or for deeper natural forces to operate. It is the effort of preparing the soil, planting the seeds, and then knowing when to step back and allow the nourishing rains of time, community, or insight to do their deep, saturating work. Your exhaustion may be a sign you are carrying too many buckets. Can you trust the rain? Can you do the preparatory work and then allow for a nourishment that comes not from your strain, but from the nature of life itself? Now, consider a story about hidden harmony, the out-of-tune string. In an orchestra rehearsing a complex symphony, one violinist's string was slightly, almost imperceptibly flat. The conductor, with a refined ear, stopped the music. The third desk, first violin. Your A is flat. Tune it, please. The violinist tightened the peg, and the orchestra continued. The symphony was beautiful, but a visiting sage, sitting in the audience, leaned over to a companion and whispered, "Did you hear it?" For just those few bars when that one string was flat, there was a unique, haunting tension. It was a moment of raw humanity in the perfection. Now it is gone, smoothed into harmony. The companion, perplexed, asked, "But isn't harmony the goal?" The sage replied, "Harmony is the goal of the orchestra. But the goal of the soul is to learn from both the flat note and the true one." The flat note taught empathy for all that is out of tune. The true note teaches alignment. Wisdom holds the memory of both. This story touches on the Buddhist middle way between indulgence and asceticism, between harsh self-judgment and laxity. We berate ourselves for our flat notes, our mistakes, our flaws, our periods of being out of sync. We want to quickly tune them out and present a perfect harmony. But the spiritual journey values the raw data of experience. That flat note of failure taught you something about fragility. That sharp note of anger taught you about your boundaries. The practice isn't to instantly erase them in shame, but to listen to their brief, honest song, learn their lesson, and then, with compassion, adjust. Your imperfections are not just errors to be corrected, they are the unique, human notes in the symphony of your becoming. I remember a time observing a master jeweler setting a diamond. He did not grab it with metal claws. First, he prepared a setting of soft, pure gold. He shaped it with gentle tools, creating a secure yet yielding nest. Only then did he place the hard, brilliant stone into it, using the malleability of the gold to gently, firmly hold the diamond's unyielding facets. The hard and the soft worked in concert. I saw this as a metaphor for how to hold our core truths. Our deepest values, our moments of clarity, are like diamonds, precious and hard. The world, with its pressures and friction, is like the metal claw that can scratch or shatter if we try to grip directly. But a mindful heart is like that soft gold setting. It doesn't alter the diamond's truth, but it creates a compassionate, adaptable, and protective context for it. When you need to hold a difficult truth or a fragile insight, don't grip it with rigid dogma or defensive anger, the metal claw. Enfold it in the soft, malleable gold of compassionate understanding. This way, your truth can shine without being damaged by the very act of holding it. Let's envision a teaching about obstacles as guides, the mountain pass and the guardhouse. A trader, new to the region, approached a high mountain pass, the only route to the prosperous valley beyond. At the entrance to the pass stood a sturdy, somewhat forbidding guardhouse. The guard stepped out, holding up a hand. "The pass is dangerous today," he said. "Wind has loosened stones. You must wait, or take the longer southern route." The trader, impatient and suspicious, saw the guard not as a protector, but as an obstacle, a petty tyrant blocking his way. He argued, he tried to bribe his way past, he grew furious. Finally, in a rage, he decided to camp right there, stubbornly waiting for the guard to relent. While he sat fuming, another trader arrived, received the same warning, thanked the guard, and turned his cart toward the southern route. A day later, the first trader heard a distant rumble from the pass, a rockfall exactly where he would have been. The guard had not been an obstacle, he had been the embodiment of the mountain's wisdom, a manifestation of protection. Our frustrations, the closed door, the failed plan, the illness that forces us to stop, often appear as these guardhouses. We see them as malicious obstacles to our will. But what if they are the protective, albeit stern, manifestation of a deeper wisdom? What if that "no" is saving you from a rockfall on the path you were so determined to take? Buddhism teaches us to question our aversion. Before you spend your energy fighting the guard, consider that he may be speaking for the mountain itself. The longer, southern route he suggests might lead you through a landscape of unexpected beauty and lessons you needed far more than a quick, perilous passage. Now, a parable about the source of light, the glowworm and the lantern. A glowworm, proud of its soft, natural bioluminescence, lived in a dark forest. One night, a traveler passed through, hanging a bright oil lantern on a branch. The lantern's light was so intense it drowned out the glowworm's gentle gleam. The glowworm felt insignificant, useless. It tried to glow brighter, straining until it was exhausted, but could not compete. Dejected, it hid in the leaves. Later, the traveler packed up and left, taking the lantern. The forest plunged into a darkness deeper than before, for everyone's eyes were adjusted to the lantern's glare. In that profound dark, the glowworm's soft light became not just visible, but essential, a tiny, reliable point of orientation for the nocturnal creatures. It realized its light was not meant to compete with lanterns, but to be a steadfast beacon in the natural dark. We often compare our inner light, our peace, our joy, our resilience, to the glaring, impressive lanterns of others' success, confidence, or extroversion. We feel dim in comparison. But the Dharma teaches that your light has its own ecology, its own purpose. It is not for blazing in the marketplace. It is for glowing faithfully in the deep forest of the soul, providing guidance when the artificial lights go out, when you and others are in the natural, shared dark of struggle. Do not strain to match a lantern's glare. Tend your gentle, innate glow. It is in the deepest dark that its true value is revealed, and it is enough. Let us conclude with a story of simple, profound return. It is the tale of the jar of river water. A woman, seeking clarity, traveled to a sacred river. She filled a jar with its clear, flowing water, sealed it tight, and carried it back to her arid homeland. She placed the jar on her altar, a token of the river's purity. But as days passed in the sealed darkness, the water grew stagnant, cloudy, and developed a faint, unpleasant smell. Distraught, she felt she had lost the sacred essence. She returned to the river, jar in hand, and confessed her failure to a riverside monk. He took the jar, opened it, and poured the stale water back into the flowing current. For a moment, it created a faint, murky swirl, but then it was gone, absorbed and purified by the river's endless movement. He then refilled the jar, but this time, he did not seal it. "Do not keep it closed," he said. "The water stays clear not by being isolated from the world, but by being part of the flow. Leave it open. Let the air touch it. Let dust settle and be poured off. Replenish it often from your own well, from the rain, from any source of life. Its clarity is not a static state to be captured, but a dynamic relationship with the whole." She understood. Her heart was the jar. Her practice was not to seal herself off from life to protect a transient feeling of peace, but to remain open, to allow the stagnant thoughts to be poured back into the flow of mindful awareness, and to constantly replenish her spirit with small, conscious connections to the source. A breath, a moment of gratitude, an act of kindness. The Buddha's path is not about achieving a permanent state of sealed-off perfection. It is about learning to live as an open vessel, in constant, gentle exchange with the moving river of life, trusting the flow to renew your clarity again and again. So, as our long meditation comes to a close, carry this understanding with you. You are the open jar, not the sealed relic. Your strength is not a fortress to be defended, but a resilience learned like the willow, a depth cultivated like the aged wine, a light sustained like the glowworm's faithful gleam. The teachings of Buddhism, shared through these stories, are not commandments from afar. They are mirrors held up to your own experience, revealing truths you have always carried but may have forgotten how to see. When the wind of hardship blows, do not merely brace. Remember the reed. Bend, and know your roots are intertwined with all of life. When you feel stained by experience, do not scrub in shame. Remember the brook. Carry your color, it will soften into wisdom. When you are in the dark, straining for a distant lantern, remember the glowworm. Your own gentle light is enough for the next step. When you feel worn smooth, your edges gone, remember the coin. Your value is in the story of that weathering, the touch of time that has made you a sacred relic of your own journey. The path continues long after this voice falls silent. It continues in your next breath, in your next moment of patience, in your next choice for kindness amidst frustration. You do not need to seek a distant temple. The monk's temple is the mindful space you cultivate within your own chest with each conscious breath. Return here, to this feeling, whenever the world grows loud. Thank you for walking this path with me, here at Monk's Temple. May you carry this sense of open, resilient peace with you. May you remember your inherent capacity to bend, to flow, to deepen, and to glow. Go gently. You are so very strong, in all the ways that truly matter. Good night.